Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randirhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little man. The fall.
We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
Tonight, NBC News has learned that top-secret intelligence requested by President Obama in his last weeks in office identified 7 states where there was substantial evidence of compromise by the Russians prior to the 2016 election.
Oh, great.
All part of a broad-based covert operation. 3 senior intelligence officials tell NBC News, as of January 2017, the states were believed to be Alaska, California, Arizona, Texas, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Florida. The intelligence was a synthesis of months of work as the intelligence community continued to evaluate. However, multiple federal officials tell NBC News that the states were never told of the intelligence assessment that they had been successfully compromised by the Russian government. Washington did tell several states that a foreign government was probing their election systems. Reluctance to share the information with the states may have been due in part to the classification of the intelligence itself. Multiple intelligence officials tell NBC News pinning it on the Russian government came from exceptionally sensitive sources and methods, including human spies and eavesdropping on Russian communications. No state election official at the time had a security clearance sufficient to permit access to such sensitive information.
Whether or not state elections officials have the proper clearance has unfortunately been an excuse, in my opinion, for why information or intelligence hasn't been more quickly shared with state elections officials. We've got to fix that right away.
I think too much of this has happened behind the veil of the government, and much more has to be discussed openly with the public.
Bradley Moss, a lawyer specializing in national security, tried to lift that veil. He wanted to find out what U.S. intelligence knew about the Russian attempts to compromise the voter system. He sued and won, and just last week received 118 top-secret pages almost completely blacked out.
The spreadsheets show that there were documented breaches of election networks, and that there was a widespread concern among several agencies in the intelligence community about the sanctity and the integrity of these election networks.
You've got Russia.
No, you have Russia. You have Russia advocating for you. You had Russia, infiltrating 7 states. I mean, it's unbelievable. And they couldn't tell the states because the state election officials, like the Secretary of State, like that, don't have security clearances. Oh, my God. This is quite a game they're playing. And, of course, as soon as this report aired on NBC, that the 7 states have been compromised by the Russian government. Yes, the Russian government was behind it, and they had been successful. All of a sudden, the acting press secretary at the Department of Homeland Security, Tailor, his name is Tailor, everybody. Our security is in the hands of a kid named Tailor. He said, NBC's reporting on the 2016 election is not accurate. It's actively undermining efforts of the Department of Homeland Security to work in close partnership with state and local governments to protect the nation's election systems from foreign actors. So NBC it's NBC's fault if you ask Tailor. Tailor's going to tell you they shouldn't report this stuff. They shouldn't do it. They're undermining the Department of Homeland Security's ability to, do stuff and stuff to protect. They said the whole thing is factually inaccurate and misleading. Well, then this morning, after the Department of Homeland Security said, this is misleading, this is inaccurate, this is undermining our efforts to protect the sanctity of the voting experience for the Americans. Michael Daniel, the top White House cybersecurity official at the end of the Obama administration, told NBC News that the government's assessment when he left the White House in January of 2017 was networks in 7 states were compromised. Just saying. I think they got it right over there, is what it is. Let me. Sarah Honey Boo Boo, she decided yesterday that she would blame Obama. Okay, because we all know that Obama was very interested in helping the Russians help Donald Trump win the presidency. Just let that marinate in your brain for a minute, because that is what you would have to believe. To believe Sarah Honey Boo Boo, you would have to believe that Obama wanted the Russians helping Donald Trump. And that is why he saw it and didn't do anything. He was down with it. But this is what she, and I got to tell you, yesterday, the NSA director, now NSA is it's our cyber command. This is all they do, electronic surveillance of foreign adversaries, spying, and stuff like that there. And cybersecurity for the United States. That is what the National Security Agency does. And Admiral Mike Rogers, who, by the way, is retiring, which is why I think he felt free to talk, because the last time they asked Mike Rogers questions, he was like, I can't tell you anything. I can't tell you. I can't say. I'm sworn to secrecy. It would compromise. And then yesterday he was like, yeah, sure. Why not? I'll tell you. I'll tell you everything. The president has ordered me to do absolutely nothing. I have not had any authority. He needs something called day-to-day authority to monitor the Russian activity. Said the president hasn't given him day-to-day authority to do it, that he doesn't have any new authority to do anything to, protect the United States against Russia, that Trump hasn't told him a thing about taking on the Russians. This is unbelievable. Trump gave Gary Busey more responsibility on the Celebrity Apprentice than he's giving Mike Rogers, okay? I just want to say that, because here's Mike Rogers' testimony yesterday. Senator Jack Reed asked Mike Rogers whether or not the president instructed him to do anything.
But the mission teams, particularly at the origin of these attacks, have the authority to do so.
If granted the authority, and I don't have the day-to-day authority to do that, if granted the authority.
So you would need basically to be directed by the president through the Secretary of Defense.
Yes, sir. In fact, I mentioned that in my statement.
Have you been directed to do so, given the strategic threat that faces the United States and the significant consequences you recognize already?
No, I have not, but if I could flesh this out, I'll say something in an open unclassified. I'd be glad to go into more details.
Yes, sir.
In a classified.
No, I have not. And Jack Reed also asked this question to Chris Wray, the director of the FBI. Were you instructed to take any actions against Russian meddling?
Has the president directed you and your agency to take specific actions to confront and blunt Russian influence activities that are ongoing?
We're taking a lot of specific efforts to blunt Russian
directed by the president?
Not as specifically directed by the president.
Okay.
Now, Trump is a man who has no problem saying any damn thing, except he won't say anything at all about Russia. It's just so fascinating. But so Jack Reed asks, have you been given a mission? Have you been given the day-to-day authority? Because, the admiral testifies that he needs that to be given to him from the president in order to stand on that wall. And he hasn't been given, and neither has the FBI been given any specific direction in which to go in order to stop Russia from meddling. Okay, so now that you know that, Elizabeth Warren she followed up on this, and she said, well, what message does it send to the Russians, Admiral Rogers? What message does it send that we're not doing anything?
What message does it send to Vladimir Putin that the United States has not fully implemented sanctions to counter known Russian cyber attacks?
More broadly, not just the sanctions, but more broadly, my concern is I believe that President Putin has clearly come to the conclusion there's little price to play here.
Bingo.
And that, therefore, I can continue this activity.
Yes.
Everything, both as a director of NSA and what I see in the cyber command side, leads me to believe that if we don't change the dynamic here, this is going to continue. And 2016 won't be viewed as something isolated. This is something will be sustained over time. So I think the challenge for all of us is, so what are the tools available to us? And as the strategy says, diplomatic, economic, some cyber things, there are tools available to us.
could we just authorize Mike Rogers to sell cupcakes to raise money or something? I mean, I just don't even raise money to stop the He's not been given any authority to do anything. And the message that we're sending to Russia is, come on in, have at it. And what? I think Trump is counting on Russia. I really do. I think that this is still ongoing. I don't think that, the hacking is still ongoing. I know the hacking is still ongoing, but I think that Trump is counting on it. I swear to God. That's why he's not worried about anything Russia is doing, because come 2020, and he thinks he's going to run for re-election in 2020. And of course, I don't think he's going to make it to 2020. Hurry up, Mueller. But this crazy thing. And so what does he do? Yesterday, he says Brad Pascal, who was introduced to the campaign by one Jared Kushner, who lost his top secret clearance yesterday because he's compromised. The Washington Post had an article that said that at least 4 countries see Jared as being what they called naive and manipulatable, blackmailable, a guy who has a $1.2 billion note coming due, might do anything in order to get foreign money to bail him out with Vornado Capital, which is who he owes the money to. Everybody's always wondering, well, who does Jared owe this money to? That's who he owes it to. He owes it to the guy from Vornado Capital, who's a friend of of the Trump family. And he said it's not sustainable. He can't keep the note. Jared better come up with $1.2 billion to pay me back, because the note's coming due, and I don't want to foreclose on this dog of a building with the 666 address. I don't want it. And so Jared has been talking to the Chinese. Jared's been talking to the Mexicans. Jared's been talking to the Qataris. He's been talking to the United Arab Emirates. Jared's been talking to the Israelis. Please bail me out. All these places, while he's got, access to the presidential daily briefing, where he knows all this sensitive information about every damn thing, which he, let me put it simply. If you applied for a security clearance, right? And you had $10,000 worth of gambling debt, or, I don't know, you were upside down in your house and your financial picture was really dank, your FICO score, if you go for a job, they do check your credit score now to see, of what character you are. But it's beyond that for a security clearance. They check to see whether or not you owe any money to people, so that they know that if you get the security clearance and you get the sensitive information, you won't trade it to the loan shark, or you won't trade it to the Russian mafia, or you won't trade that information to the China in order to get $10,000 to bail out your gambling debt, right? Well, Jared owes $1.2 billion. And they said yesterday he's not likely to ever get a security clearance, and yet he's still, he's still in the White House with all these people saying, and how do they know? Because the NSA knows, because that's what Admiral Rogers and the NSA do. They have intercepted phone calls with foreign government officials and foreign bankers, Veshnakom Bank from Russia. All these people, they've all been picked up on wiretaps, and they've all been picked up on, surveillance tapes, saying, Jared owes a hell of a lot of money. I think we could exploit him here. I think we could get our hands on some really interesting information. And what was Jared in charge of? The data operation for the Trump campaign. And with whom did he work? The Mercers, Cambridge Analytica, and Brad Pascal, who they just hired again yesterday. He's counting on the Russians. Go to RandiRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.